I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our biased reaction to the Lost Omens Mwangi Expanse.
So, last episode, we got through the introduction and the history of the Mwangi Expanse, which is a very long history, just like any area in Golarion. Unrealistically long history of Golarion that sort of the planet has. Here we're going to go into people of the Mwangi Expanse, which got new ancestries. It's got old ancestries, but with new ethnicities and people groups that are of those ancestries, and we're going to find it all out here.
So, in the ancestry section here on the first page, it talks about how in broad terms, how some of the core rulebook ancestries, where they might appear, and how they and broadly how they live.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So it just broadly talks about, like, there's only small numbers of gnomes. Goblin populations barely exist outside of the coast because there's pirates, including monkey goblins. And Mwangi peoples more often view goblins with curiosity than prejudice because they barely even see them at all.
And orcs have a reputation as heroic demon hunters.
Yes, thanks to the orcs who live in the Mwangi Expanse.
And it talks a bit about language, which we did address a little bit last time, that the common tongue of the Mwangi Expanse is known simply as Mwangi, which is the trade language that was developed to be accessible to a lot of folks in the same way that a lot of the other commons of the world have been.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a bunch of regional languages.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, rarity.
Yep.
Talking about what ancestries are common and what kind of variations of rarity you can expect if you're in the Mwangi Expanse.
So the GM might make kobolds, lizard folks, and orcs common ancestries, but gnomes and goblins uncommon in the Mwangi Expanse. And then there are others like catfolk, gnolls, and gripplies that like kind of aren't common even in the Mwangi Expanse, but are on the fence. So the group might choose, if you're in an area of the Mwangi Expanse that's really near them, I guess, to include them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
here we are with common groups, the most widespread ethnic groups in the Mwangi Expanse.
So there's Bekiar, and Bekiar is one of the ethnic groups that are often misunderstood as being like evil just for fun, but are very, very pragmatic, and they really don't like outsiders.
They make deals with fiends.
Yep, they're major slave traders of the types of groups they don't like, particularly like colonists and explorers from the northern continent of Eviston, or just anyone they see as an invader. But they will also enslave other Mwangi groups as well, potentially. And they might even help them. Like, they're not just, like, a monolith of evil, but they are definitely more likely to be dealing with
fiends and slavery
with
and
fiends
things like
and
that.
slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Then there's Banwat. So, they live on the coast and are kind of, as a whole, like, very, very keen on sea voyages and water and, like, a connection to the ocean. And some of them have water-breathing magic that there are actual, like, ancestry and background options where you can wind up getting their water-breathing magic for your character if you're a Banwat. And yeah, so Banwat are among, like, some of the best seafarers, period, in the Inner Sea region. And they just have a deep connection to it. Let's see. And there's a cool picture of Bekiar and then Banwat Kaldaru are, let's see, those are the people who mostly live in Sengor, right?
Yeah, they're the people who mostly live in Sengor, and they have made a lot of connections to people from around the world. So they have a cultural melting pot.
Mm-hmm. And you can see that there's like a lot of different styles going on with this example Kaldaru person in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
They're major traders and merchants, and obviously that puts them like right as major allies of different Bonawat groups, because if the Bonawat can culture is great at giving you ships and you want to trade, right? It's major potential for allies, and they have very similar values and care a lot about family, and that's how they work together.
Mm-hmm.
So Mauxi people live often in the northern Mwangi Expanse, and there are also some significant Mauxi groups in some of the northern Garundi countries.
Yeah, and they have strong connections to the societies of Thuvia and Osirian.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a Mauxi minority in Rahadub that's also fairly common.
Mm-hmm.
And they, let's see.
So they're changing cultural shifts where we're all older Mauxi people tend to see themselves as more of, we are this unit that is separate from the other groups of the Mwangi Expanse. Younger Mauxi have been taking on more of the customs and rituals from elsewhere in the Mwangi Expanse, and really focusing more on their connection to other groups as well.
Mm-hmm. And Mauxi government is a monarchy that is ruled by a family said to be tied to Osirian royalty. So that's actually kind of interesting.
Sargavans then are the descendants of Chalaxian colonists. So they have had a lot of changes since the decolonialization of the region. Some of them are many of them are living in Blood Cove, trying to find a way for themselves, because Sargavans are not the most popular people.
I mean, because Cheliax didn't like them, as we mentioned in the history. They were coming after them, and now they've been overthrown. And
they tend to be viewed as like, oh, these are invaders, these are enslavers.
Yep. And there were also like a fair number, but by far not the majority of Sargavan citizens who helped the revolution of Vidrian, because they did not like the way that the other Sargavans were sort of doing things.
And those Sargavans are now more like politically involved and respected.
Well, they're still in Vidrian, and they're official citizens, and officially they are free from retribution, but they wind up having culture clashes anyway, because of the fact that, they used to be part of the dominant culture, but now they are a significant minority of the melting, or like the melting pot culture of Vidrian that is bringing in people from across the Mwangi Expanse.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, even though they helped try to do the revolution, many of former Slythen's servants are still openly hostile to them, because they were part of this like corrupt society that was there before.
Yep. So then, speaking of the people of Vidrian, the Vidric people are the people of Vidrian,
Mm-hmm.
And they have a culture that comes from a wide variety, mixing in from like a wide variety of places.
Yep. I think majority
Yeah.
Zenj, but based on what I know from the sort of the demographics of former Sargava and the revolution. But yeah, it's hugely mixed in.
And
Most don't
generally,
even know their ethnic
yeah.
heritage at this point.
So they embrace whatever traditions they see that resonate most with them.
Mm-hmm. And they really don't like Bekyar people,
Yep.
since Bekyar has participated in the Sargavan slave trade and contributed to their suffering.
And then the Zenj.
Yep.
The majority of the Mwangi Expanse is populated by Zenj people.
So it's probably not surprising that probably the majority of the Vidric melting pot also has a lot of Zenj people, since they are the majority.
Mm-hmm. So Zenj folks are Zenj folks live in all sorts of places throughout the Mwangi Expanse. Some of them are semi-nomadic and live in the savannah, and then some of them prefer to live in the jungle, and they live and then they set down permanent settlements there.
That's right. And the semi-nomadic savannah Zenje are matriarchal, and the jungle Zenju are patriarchal.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other groups of humans as well that wind up in the Mwangi Expanse. So, elephant people are an offshoot of Mauxi and Osirian, who discovered proof that ancient Osirian used to worship elephants. And so they came over here because, they're following migratory elephants. This is a good place for that. And yeah, it's a different offshoot of Mauxi and Osirian. Leargeni, they are not in the greatest situation, because the nation of Leargan was destroyed 100 years ago by the Eye of Abendigo. And so you can find Leargeni, they had like a minor diaspora throughout the region.
I mean, if the place that you used to live is now just like called the Sodden Lands, like,
yeah,
you know that something terrible happened.
And it says that the largest Leargeni population now resides within Jaha. But you can find them all around the region, because they don't, you don't want to just stay in the Sodden Lands.
Yeah, there's like a few thousand who people who still live there to try to connect to their ancient studies of astrology and discern the future through traditional practices, but most people
That's
have
right.
moved on.
So Uomoto are a Mwangi tribe dwelling near the ruins of Ko, which a fallen sky city, and they have more magic users, and they experiment from things in the ruins, and kind of scavenge. Yamasans were also devastated by the Eye of Abendigo, like Leargeni people.
But because they were primarily agricultural, their entire economy collapsed and their homelands were shattered. So generally, they have scattered throughout the world, and many of them now live in Absalom.
Yep, but they brought all of the secrets of their world-class agriculture with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to deal with the fact that they're now, like, in a much more major diaspora than Leargeni, and they used to have a caste system that was very structured when they were living in their own place, but now, they have to do things very differently as a people in diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's the humans that we found in the Mwangi Expanse.
I didn't flip before, so here is the
There's
art here for
Zenj
a Zenj
and
person and a
Leargeni.
Leargeni person.
Let's move on to elves.
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 All right,
So,
here we are.
All of the elves pretty much are the Alijai, and there are different groups of the Mualijai. Let's see. So we have Alijai elves. It says they're a split of Mualijai. Oh wait, no, right.
Yeah, Alijai and Ekujai are
Alijai and Ekujai are different,
Yes.
and Mualijai is the big group. I always get Mualijai and Alijai confused. I know Ekujai is a subgroup.
Yes.
So, Alijai are reclusive hermits who deal in otherworldly power, whereas Ekujai are kind of they also are not necessarily huge fans of outsiders, and they're enigmatic, but they are respected scholars who sometimes do venture from their homes to, teach students at the Mogambia or go to the university or other things like that. So and they're also more likely to fight off like Aspis Consortium and other enemies in the area, and take down slavers.
The split between Alijai and Ekujai happened over a prophecy that spoke to the nature of the nature of an ancient evil that was going to come, and the Alijai people had a very strong idea of what this ancient evil was going to be and what needed to be done in order to stop it.
Mm-hmm. They believed that they needed to kind of take the oral tradition of Mwangi that had been going on and like kind of structure and make it formal and write it down and do this very exact thing, and that was not very popular within the overall group. But those who became Alijai were the first to be like, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We're not going to do purely oral storytelling. We're going to write this down.
Record everything, and we're going to record everything in triplicate.
Yes, we'll make periodic backups. And so they basically set off to record this information and get this like very special poem that they were making that now kind of sprawls across the walls of Nagisa. And it began on the walls of a pyramid once dedicated to Nocticula when she was a demon lord. And it's got this huge poem that's there now. And that's why there's a random statue of Nocticula that is in the art here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an item, Genealogy Mask, which could allow you to replay back some deeds of the ancestor that one of your ancestors stored in the mask. This is another way that they kept periodic backups.
Yes.
Of everything. Because just writing it on the walls was not enough. Sometimes people don't see the writing on the wall.
And then here on the next page it talks about society. Alijai society is structured pretty openly because it's a small population that's very spread out. So they have a system of coded correspondences that are managed by archivists, so that all adult Alijai people can vote on issues of importance.
That's right. And the Alijai with the mask here is just a really cool piece of art, I think.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
They also usually have a patron deity, not because of the fact that Alijai culture is like particularly theocratic or religious, but more
because
of like
it's intensely practical. And they're
it's
like,
practical.
yeah,
it's like we're fighting demons. We probably need a good deity or something who doesn't like them, who is gonna give us the tools to defeat them. So that's kind of a thing with Alijai culture.
Mm-hmm.
And they have certain cultural touchstones, which are kind of cool that you can see here. There's sections on, I guess it's on the next spread.
Yes.
That's like, take all that is offered, is one of their cultural touchstones. One of them is far from home, because they will wind up having to go through many different other cultures when they're remotely, and they're not sort of connected to their fellows because there's so few of them, and they spread out to do what they're going to do.
And take all that is offered isn't just like when someone gives you a physical object. It's also a lot about learning new things.
Mm-hmm. And afterlife through history, which is connected to also, right, the mass that like will store your memories that other people in the future, your descendants, can bring back and use. There's also half elves, but like obviously it's a pretty small culture. It doesn't have as many half elves, but also like they really value anyone who's part of the Alijai community, and that will include half elves.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some groups of elves in England are not always like completely welcoming of half elves because of like the differences that throw them off. But among Alijai, it's like, no, you know what? We're all Alijai if we're doing this thing with the giant poem, and you guys can probably go the farthest afield to figure things out.
Yeah, but they're not. Alijai half elves are not obligated to be like, you must do this thing. Many of them choose for a variety of reasons to engage with their cultural history.
That's right. And they're cautious among everyone, even Ekujai and Kalijai elves, because their guardianship over Nagisa and the poem and all those other things, they're worried that things could fall into the wrong hands, and that could be anybody. So that's what makes them like even the most reclusive among those three groups.
But as it says in Relations, Alijai people will sometimes willingly join groups and organizations to sort of suss out what their deal is, like the Pathfinder Society and the Aspis Consortium, and things like that, because they want to make sure that they have a good network of understanding what's going on everywhere at any given time, because we don't know where this evil is specifically going to rise, so we better make sure that we keep track of it. And we also know that we want to make sure that we create, we take what is offered, we create the valuable alliances and gain the information that we can.
Also, considering how insular they are, it's very like major touchstone for them that when they made connections with Kyonin, and we mentioned this in our reaction to Lost Omens Legends, they wound up having a marriage proposal between the Queen of Kyonin and an Alijai elf named Zazarel. So, in fact, an Alijai elf could become like the Prince Consort or whatever the name of the title for the non-reginal non-reginal husband of the Queen is in Kyonin.
But he's doing he is taking the time to observe and assess the situation.
Because it's not just a, like, they say it and then he has to do it. He's observing. He's like, well, I'm not sure. And so they're over there now, but according to the Lost Omens and Legends, it seems like it's going pretty well so far. So, of course, Nagisa, which we've mentioned a few times, the White City, is the, like, Alijai city with all of their secrets there. And there's also Buyisela, known as Scholar's Haven, which is a stronghold that is there for scholars. They've got archives. There's something called the Proving, which is a series of circular grounds that they set up for sparring, dueling, and practicing. The Queen's Vault, which refers to the Redeemer's Queen's Vault, although there are other vaults that are just referred to as Queen's Vaults.
I want to take a sec to look at the chat here. Thank you for subscribing. Let's see, we have Captain Nemo and Elf Tarot. And there's a comment about liking the relationship between the groups in the Expanse. Viston can feel disconnected in places.
It can, but I really, really like how it all overlaps in Mwangi Expanse, and it feels real, and it feels like it feels like if you have this book that you understand what it means to be someone in the Mwangi Expanse in terms of like how you relate to the rest of the Expanse and not just your own home culture.
Yeah, I feel like there's
Whereas in
in Avisten it tends to be more like, this is the place that's in an eternal French Revolution. And yes, it does talk about the connections, but it doesn't.
It's like, yeah, the French Revolution hates the devils.
Yeah.
But
so it'll talk more about, like, you know, what do people think about each other in the present day, but you don't necessarily see quite as much of that, like, how did cultures evolve together and apart?
Yep.
And how do they interact with each other and on a deeper level?
And there's temples and trading posts. And then there is an example NPC that you can use if you need an NPC among the Alijai Zola, the child of two master archivists. So that is Alijai, and you can see it's pretty awesome because there are 10 pages entirely on Alijai.
Yes.
And then Ekujai, as we mentioned before, Ekujai may be considered enigmatic to most outsiders, but they will come out and, like, help out and teach at the Gambia or go out and fight slavers and the Aspis Consortium. And overall, they're warriors, whereas you might consider the Alijai groups to be scholars. They're pretty skeptical of foreigners, so that's something that's similar to Alijai.
Their experience is that, like, the same patterns, the same troublesome patterns will repeat themselves over and over again, and while you may find, like, an individual who is trustworthy, that they're part of this organization that sends in people, that sends in other people later on, and then those people are coming in and are trying to take advantage of or exploit the Ekuje for some ambition or another.
Yep. And the Ekujai had a great darkness that they had to deal with during the Age of Darkness, which is a problem for everybody, but
their belief is like, yeah, you know, the identity is lost to time, or maybe it was some kind of a fanciful, or rather,
most scholars think that, but Ekujai know that their great darkness was actually just flat out an incarnation of the dragon god Dahak, who just came down and was just like, let it burn. And Ekujai forces defeated Dahak and drove him away into a magical gate. And a whole bunch of Ekujai were killed doing that.
Yes. And it's considered to be, they're both the greatest triumph and the most crushing defeat, because they defeated a god.
Well, an incarnation of God, but still.
They defeated an incarnation of a god, but then it's like, well, but the dragon is still there. It's wounded and imprisoned. It's not
these are the warriors
destroyed.
Among Mwangi elves.
And we weren't able to completely... They're like, well, we weren't able to completely destroy the incarnation of the god. We only imprisoned it.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a sidebar mentioning that even though Ekujai may be unwelcoming, if they actually do declare you as a guest, then they are extremely hospitable. But they're unlikely to do so unless you prove yourself in some way.
And structurally, Ekujai society is organized into clans that are self-sufficient, but they do collaborate with each other and maintain strong relations.
Right. And I mean, when you have a clan, that means that they are all basically a family group, right?
Yeah.
So you at least have to have some interaction between any clan structure where, you know, you're going to trade out, marry across the clans because you're a family group. But Ekujai clans go much further beyond that because of the fact that they are an entirely united group when it comes down to it, if it has to.
Yeah, so shorter lived ancestries might be like, oh yeah, you know, this isn't so connected, and they're like, what are you talking about? We had this big summit 20 years ago.
Yeah, we all came there. There was a major emergency.
Yeah.
And when that emergency happens, they will be like, hey, Linda, you're the queen for this emergency.
Mm-hmm.
Deal with the emergency. and then it immediately ends. Oh
Yeah.
no, it looks like it might
They
stay.
have
It
one.
might stay, but you
Yeah, they have one,
basically
but they
don't get
only
to
do
do
stuff
anything
unless there's an
during the
emergency.
emergency.
It's like,
That's
yeah,
what it is.
it's like, yeah,
You're the queen. Don't do anything until
the
there's an
queen, okay, there's
emergency.
an
Then
emergency, here we
then
go.
when we need one centralized voice, it's
then
gonna be
that's you, and then okay, the emergency over, we're back to normal.
Yep.
But because they democratically elect and nominate their rulers.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's like a really contentious election, then the winner is going to have to usually perform some kind of a challenge or a task to prove that they're worthy of the role.
Yep. And they particularly Ekujai do not like Chalaxians, dragons, worshippers of Abadar, and fiends.
Yes.
Those are their least favorite. They like all of the other elves of the Mwangi Expanse, even though Alijai are wary of them. And they too, they particularly like half-elves. Like, if Alijai consider half-elves to be like, oh, half-elves are just Alijai, and we're all Alijai, Ekujai, like, go out of their way to be additionally cordial to half-elves because they feel bad about the stories they hear of bad situations for half-elves in Avistan.
Yes.
And they like Uelral, the elven goddess.
Oh, I see a comment here. We hate dragons, fiends, and worst of all, lawyers.
Yes, lawyers.
Yeah, Avadar's inclusion on that list is definitely interesting.
Stump Monkey says, emergency queen Linda for life. Hey, life is long for an elf.
It is. That would mean a perpetual state of emergency.
Yep. Absolutely. And, so
talks about there's a high value on high value placed on art and academia.
Mm-hmm. And they Ekujai belief is that.
But I do want to talk about the records here because you can see in the art here it's really cool.
Okay.
What they outsiders can find it hard to read and decipher the way that Ekujai traditionally stored knowledge. In addition to like oral and musical traditions, they also cultivate record trees that they have grow in very specific patterns to serve as a permanent record of important information and events.
You can kind of read the tree.
Yeah, it's a 3-dimensional language that also records information about like sound and physical movement. And
they build hanging gardens, also partially to put record trees, but also for other kinds of plants and trees, fruit trees especially. So, just like there are 4 magical essences that you can kind of split all magic into, Ekujai believed that your soul is split into 4 different components. There is sort of like what your father gave you, I guess, kind of like a component that comes from your biological father, which is physical form. What your mother gave you, which is your heritage and family. What your heart gave you, your personality and personal taste. And what the gods gave you, which is like the mysterious part. So you can kind of map that onto the 4 magical essences where the physical form is matter, and the heritage and family is sort of mind, and heart is life, what your heart gives you, just your personal tastes, and then what the gods gave you, spiritual essence, that mysterious stuff that goes into the great beyond. Which is pretty cool. They have their own names and personalities, and may not necessarily agree with each other.
And so it's important. It's an important part of life to make sure that you are taking care of all 4 parts of your soul.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the 4 parts of your soul are out of balance, then that can cause a lot of internal turmoil.
That's right. And since their major deity is Uelral, the goddess of gems and magic, it's really unsurprising that they love jewelry. I mean, the goddess of gems and magic. But they do not like gold because they believe that there's a bunch of it beneath their land, which they think is the cold breath and blood of Dahak that spilled during the battle and is therefore cursed by dragons. But there's all sorts of jewelry you can make, and you can make a special kind of gold, which is purified by elves of great virtue.
Yeah, so the Kaleti, or elves of great virtue, have sworn to sacrifice their lives in the fight against Dahak. They wear ritually purified gold as a sign that they are worthy enough that they can.
Yes. So, for example, this the elf on this page on the right is either that's not gold or is a Kaleti.
Yes. I look at her arm. I think
that she's likely a Kaleti.
Yes.
Who was sworn to fight against the dragon. So you see gold, you know this is a hero who's sworn to basically fight against a god if that god shows up again, which is like a pretty bold statement to make. All right, and thanks for the gift sub, Elf Churro. So, yeah, that is sort of a lot of what it has for Ekujai, but there's more talking about relationships. While they're suspicious of outsiders, they still have strong ties to the Magambia, which we mentioned before. They have a bunch of different settlements that they don't really have one giant white city like Alijai, but they do have Akrivel, home to the Leopard Clan.
The Circles, which is a center of academia and a martial training ground.
Ijo, which was established when families from various clans that were watching over dangerous areas were worried about their children.
So it's a very well defended. It's a very well defended settlement that has a lot of provisions in place for community based childcare.
It's probably a good way to mix up with children from the other nearby clans and meet them, which is important for connections.
Definitely no outsiders allowed there because it's very strongly focused on this is a place to raise and protect children.
That's right. And then the sample NPC, Ade Karo, which is short for Adebayo, who actually grew up in Absalom. And the final group of elves in Mwangi Expanse is Kalijai. So, during the fracture, Kalijai felt that the long prophesied ancient evil was within themselves.
The evil is coming from inside the house.
And then, basically, when you live for so long and you just get disconnected with everything around you and become aloof and callous, that you can become especially susceptible to evil. And they saw it, among others, and basically decided that they wanted to suppress this inclination towards feeling superior to the shorter-lived races and callous, and that caused them to split off and become Kalijai.
So they generally seek to fight the evil against the ills of the world, and also the evils within themselves. So
they were originally a bigger split, unlike Alijai were a small split, but they stayed steady and they're still kind of small. Maybe they're a little bit more. Kalijai were a bigger split, but they've been dwindling to the point where Ekujai seem like they are have the majority of the Mualijai split people right now.
And they battle against the Charuka and the forces of Angazan.
The demon lord Angazan, the guerrilla demon lord of beasts and destroying stuff. And yeah, they absolutely do, and that probably means that they team up with other people who are fighting against the Angazan, and we'll see that when we get to the later section. that mentions their relations with other people. They wear woven hair. You can kind of see that in the picture over there. With a kind of a very different hairstyle than both of the other two groups of elves. Their structure for society, outsiders consider to be, like, hard to understand. There's tons of strict rules and regulations that they created to keep themselves, like, pure of their problems for being long-lived.
So, like, don't bind any creature against its will. Don't employ familiars. Don't practice summoning magic. Compulsion magic should only be used to counteract compulsions that other creatures have put in place.
Yep.
There's a lot of guidelines around, like, study and meditation and eating a balanced diet and constantly looking to improve yourself.
And then their structure that outsiders get confused by is that there's this council of 6, like, kind of grand masters who are making overarching decisions. And they are the most capable of mastering themselves and following the rules. And below them, there are lesser masters and then mentors and then trainees.
But they don't take titles because titles are a source of pride. And if they disagree, then the one who decides is the youngest person.
So it's kind of almost like a military/religious hierarchy of teachers and students that are training in these very specific ways. And they believe gods are just as fallible as mortals, and, you know, gods live a really long time, too. So they do not observe deities. Although I'm sure Rory respects the fact, probably, that they are trying to self-perfection and not follow the path of other deities, but they don't necessarily respect Rory. In fact, they don't want to elevate someone to godlike status through self-perfection because they believe that's a problem, like worshipping deities.
And there are still quiet cults on the fringes of society who do worship some of these.
Some of the most, like, awesome among, like, the college eye masters.
There's a lot of awesome stuff in here. We're just giving a. We're just giving a little we're just giving a little snippet of some of the things that we see that are cool.
Let's see. So there is a whole bunch of cultural touchstones, the meditation and self-reflection that we mentioned before. There's something called the unburdening, which is a ritual that is performed to kind of cleanse, purify, and recenter you. The strong oral tradition, because remember, the College Eye split was about writing everything down on the walls. So, College Eye keep a strong oral tradition. The Crucible of the Heart, where you learn firsthand about the outside world by going for several years away and, like, checking out what's there. When it comes to half-elves, they use the word umaniano to symbolize the bridge with others that is represented by half-elves. They seem like the only way to understand the rapidly changing world, and since, you know, College Eye are worried about getting out of touch for being longer-lived, half-elves are a great way to try to stay closer in touch. So, when it comes to their relationships with the outside world, they kind of get along with Rahadum because of not dealing with deities very much. But they find belligerent atheism to be distasteful. So it's disappointing in the end, even though Rahadum, from Rahadum's side, Rahadum likes what they see, but from College A's side, they're like, you guys are a little bit much.
Yeah, but Rahadum is still a popular place to undertake the Crucible of the Heart.
Yes. Because of the fact that they're extremely welcoming. Even though College Eye sometimes believe, you're a little bit much. This is a little extra. they are kind of suspicious because they believe they themselves could become evil at any point in time. They view outsiders as definitely being able to do that too, because Golarion has a lot of corruption. Like, if you've seen anything about all the different countries and how many horrible things are happening, like, colleagues are not wrong that there's
Yes.
all sorts of terrible things going on. So, they have a bunch of settlements on islands in Lake Okota, which would allow them to go after Usaro and all of the Angazan worshippers who are there.
Okay, but the architecture on this page is rad.
It is really cool. Like, look, there's the waterfalls and the really cool city.
And the one on that next page, which I'm showing here, that's like got that giant horn sticking out of it. And...
So is that? Let's see. Is probably Haven, which is like this major college haven. Their foremost base of operations is always called First Stand, so Haven is sometimes deemed Last Stand.
This place of designed to be a place of rest and recovery.
That's right. There's also a feat if you want to be a Demon Bane warrior that is potentially recognizable for people who remember the Pathfinder playtest as being an updated version of the Anti-Demon Elf feat from the playtest.
There we go.
And there's another settlement, Bere Nibi, which is where college youth learn their skills, because once again, you don't necessarily want to put your kids like right up against those demons.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dio Heartshaker is a sample NPC, the eldest of 4 children. And that is all of the elves that are in the book. So there's 2 big dwarf cultures within the Mwangi Expanse. Mbeke dwarves and Taralu dwarves. And it is very easy for outsiders to get them confused because both of them have extremely Cloud Dragon-centric cultures. So when it comes to Mbeke dwarves, we have to make sure to get this right about how they deal with the different Cloud Dragons. So Mbeke dwarves live alongside Cloud Dragons. Oh, there's Leshibot. As a partnership. They do not worship the dragons. That is very important. Because, as we will eventually get to, Taralu dwarves do not live alongside Cloud Dragons, but they do worship the dragons. And so, therefore, that's sort of a big difference between...
Speaking of Cloud Dragons, look at this rad art.
The art of living alongside Cloud Dragons?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So, yeah, when it comes to Mbeke dwarves, they pretty much live with these Cloud Dragons. They dwell in the Sky Citadel of Cloudspire and maintain an alliance with Cloud Dragons. And there are relics of High King Nikobe from the early times among the Mbeke, where High King Nikobe was the last scion of the royal family who was known for a strong temper and was sure that his dead son was poisoned and began to recruit minions and
there was a bloody civil war.
Cause a civil war. It was not great.
Nowadays, the name Nikobe just refers to evil, mayhem, and cruel tyranny.
Yep.
Nobody's naming their kids that anymore.
It's not like a very common name among dwarven children, in the same way that certain names that have become associated with infamy are no longer very common among children on Earth.
Yes.
So, when it comes to Mbeke dwarves really like making these really sturdy ships and that they use for trade, and that's also why they got into major wars with pirates. The Corsair Wars, where about 100 years ago, the first time that they happened, and then like 20 to 30 years ago was the Second Corsair Wars, and then the Third Corsair Wars are still ongoing and started a few years ago.
You might notice something about the dwarf on this page that differs from some of the other depictions of dwarves that we've seen, and this is actually a cultural difference, that Mbeke dwarves typically shave their beards.
Yep. That's right. You're going to be able to tell Mbeke and Tualu dwarves apart very easily based on that. They also like these really kind of billowing pants, and if you look at the outfit, you can also tell the
billowing
difference from
pants
that.
are popular, and headscarves for all genders.
Mm-hmm.
And amber is super fashionable since it's associated with electricity and cloud dragons.
Yep. And so when it comes to the society of Mbeke dwarves, there's kind of an assembly of speakers, and there's cloud dragons involved.
There's
as
also
well.
a lot of organization that's based off of broad categories of occupation. People organizing into fellowships based on their occupation.
Yeah, guild-like structures called fellowships.
Yes.
And
who have sort of an obligation to mutually support each other.
Mm-hmm. And so the Cloud Dragons, it's kind of like they're there and they're very respected in society, but they also are not like completely integrated at all doing the same things, because Cloud Dragons have a pretty different life cycle than dwarves, and they work together and they each kind of do their own thing while living together.
And they generally, like, the Cloud Dragons get a seat at the table for these important decisions, but the dwarves also make sure that Cloud Dragons don't get a large enough voting block that they could outvote dwarves. Because they recognize that, they recognize that Cloud Dragons are not infallible.
Oh, hey.
Hi, Trippy, welcome.
Thanks for creating a hype train, everybody.
Thanks for the sub. Thanks for the sub, Kitsune.
And Elf.
And Trippy.
And then Trippy. And also Trippy's share. And it made it into a hype train.
Thank you, everybody.
So, I mean, who doesn't like a society living alongside dragons, right? And that is why everyone's cheering for the dragon.
I just want to read a sentence from this.
Okay, go for it.
About the Cloud Dragons. They're also fickle as cats, prone to flights of whimsy that can distract them for years, and as capable of wisdom or foolishness as any dwarf.
Yeah.
I really like that, because there's so much of a sense of dragons as being, like, majestic and inapproachable. But with this sort of thing, it really presents them as people that you could see living alongside, even if they receive that extra reverence.
Yes. Cloud Dragons are really interesting because they're kind of neutral, and they can have sort of a lot of different worldviews in that sense. So they work together really in an amusing way with the Mbeke dwarves.
I wound up getting one of the gift subs.
Linda, you're now subscribed to Arcane Mark. Congratulations. You could do the Leshy emojis again for a little while.
That's true. I do like my little Leshy. And another cool thing too is that some of these fellowships work directly with the dragons as their primary job. So there's also societal structures that are specifically built around being envoys to the dragons, and like being treating and kind of coaxing them into doing helpful things now and again.
And you wouldn't expect dwarves to necessarily use a lot of air magic, but Mbeke dwarves totally do, because they've learned it from Cloud Dragons. Because dwarves often associated with like earth magic, right?
Speaking of things not stereotypically associated with dwarves, here's a dwarven archer.
Yep. Definitely dwarven archers. It's important because the sky and Cloud Dragons are important to Mbeke dwarves.
So, as you might imagine, for for a society that has such a strong importance on air and the winds. Gazra is a patron who joins alongside the sort of the traditional dwarven pantheon, as well as another deity that we'll be talking about in a little bit when we get back to the deities section.
That's right. It's also useful to note that there are kobolds who are members of the Mbeke dwarves.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. It's definitely very different as far as Mbeke are concerned. Anybody who is part of their communities is Mbeke, and that includes Bekier and Banawat humans from the area, a few Kalaja elves, Songo halflings, Iruxis, Matanji orcs or gnolls, and even some kobolds from the area. And so you can see this kobold has a clan dagger. They're considered to be Mbeke dwarves, in a sense. Or maybe in a full sense.
That's pretty cool.
Yep. So they're a lot less insular in that sense than many other dwarves, although they are also equally stubborn in their own way through a lot of debate and arguments that they would make.
They also have that strong focus on community as organized through the fellowships.
Yes.
And the sense that it's important for everyone to contribute to the community in whatever ways they can.
Yes. So Cloud Spire is their sky citadel, and it's basically the center of sort of Mbeke life, because it's this giant ancient city, and you can see the picture there. It's like, it's huge, and it kind of goes in a circle around like an upper hollow area. And there's dragons around, and it's just a very, very important place.
And as you can sort of see in this art here, from the outside approaching it, it really doesn't look like much, because of the way that it's sort of built around this big open space, and the buildings and everything faces inward.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, the hype train just reached another level. It's almost at the max level. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rex Liquid, Silver Knight, and Elftra for continuing the hype train. Again, everybody likes dragon dwarves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really different than your classic kind of Tolkien dwarves who are like fighting against dragons and being all adversarial towards dragons. It's more of a really, really different take on it. I like it a lot.
So, in terms of the features of Cloudspire, there is the Ares, which is a fortress where numerous cloud dragons live.
Mm-hmm.
Aha! You're giving everyone their...
I'm giving people their XP for the hype train.
Yes, of course.
That's right.
Yes, of course.
That is what's going on. You can use the other source of information on the Mbeke. So yeah, it's huge, and unlike when we were talking about the different elves, there's just like this Sky Citadel has so many sections that there's subsections in the book talking about all of the different regions, like the assembly of the city, like the Assembly of Kings, the Dragon Bell.
Which is used to keep time and can be heard. It can be heard from several miles away. This giant bell.
The Celestial Fellowship, who live in that area, which are like a group of wizards and sages. The Hall of Bells, Nikobe's Hall, which
the Assembly of Kings, which is the governing body, which has a lot of different discussions that they're working on right now, such as what to do about the Corsair Wars and that continued threat of piracy.
The Wellspring, where they kind of put a piece of someone who has been burned, that you put like a token or statuette to go into the Wellspring. And there's King Thabsing Bloodeye, who is king of the Mbeke dwarves. So, Mbeke are pretty awesome. It could be hard to top them, but Taralu's dwarves' beards and hair are pretty fantastic. So if you take a
look at that right there.
Taralu, they are the other Cloud Dragon related dwarves. They are mediators who worship Cloud Dragons. And they are like major diplomats, which is, you know, pretty unusual for dwarves who are known for kind of being a little bit surly overall among most.
And they're
dwarves.
sometimes perceived as being like purely altruistic or kind of pushovers, but they have but their role as diplomats gives them a substantial amount of knowledge and insight and political capital that they can leverage.
Absolutely. And so basically, Taralu dwarves were kind of trapped between Nex and Geb. And so that's a similar situation to the Dongun dwarves, who their response to that was like, oh my gosh, let's go deeper underground. And then they, you know, kind of came back with really good gunpowder and guns. That's sort of the Alkenstar thing.
And their idea was, okay, we just need to get out of here, retreat into the mountains away from the warfare. Yep. And when they did, they found the ancient Cloud Dragon Tannin.
Yep. I mean, both of them wanted to get out of there.
Yeah.
But the Dongan dwarves got out of there by going down in the same area, and the Taralu dwarves got out of there by
up.
Yeah. So they got out of there in different directions.
Yes, that's true.
And yeah, the dragon basically was dying, and that's why there's this picture of this like really decrepit looking dragon on the first page. But it explained many things to the wandering Taralu dwarves, and they returned to their people, and they understood what was going on based on what the Cloud Dragon had said, and they made a major oath and buried the dragon,
and swore to stop their squabbles and wars amongst themselves, and to work together. And they didn't swear an oath of pacifism or try to become infinitely patient. They knew that they needed to stand ready to fight if should it prove necessary, but that fighting shouldn't happen among themselves.
Right, and this also makes them really not get along very much with almost any other kind of dwarf. Even Mbeke dwarves, who are, as you saw, like kind of different than dwarves you might be used to from Avistan, are still not all the way that Taralu are to being like anti-traditionalist and no more infighting. And so Taralu may be great diplomats, but they're maybe not the best people to send to actually even to talk to other dwarves, because the dwarves that are from Avistan would have these expectations that are broken by Taralu.
Yes.
So Taralu dwarves just have like the best beards. Like, look at the next one too. It's just like in all those colors. They have embassies like pretty much all over everywhere. They have 16 large clans that are each descended from a distant ancestor, because, you know, like a clan means that it's basically a family group, an extended family group.
Mm-hmm.
And
the official leader of each of these clans is a spiritual leader who has to undergo several years full of trials and challenges before they would be able to qualify for that position.
And they descend from 16 dwarves who swore the initial oath to the Cloud Dragon. And so, like, it's all connected to their beliefs about Cloud Dragons. And just, like, also other dragons. Like, Cloud Dragon is number one, but they'll worship many different, like, Apsu, the god of good dragons, and also Ranganori, the recently freed good aligned elemental lord of air, has been making inroads with these very like air focused and kind of elementally worshipping dwarves. So it's not that they only worship Cloud Dragons. They go through the gamut of other like kind of air based good deities as well.
Whereas by contrast, the way that they see Torag and the Dwarven Pantheon is more of a reverence for an old teacher or an elder rather than the extensive worship that they would grant to these dragons.
That's right. So they basically kind of wander around nomadically, and they think of that as being connected to the wind and kind of the patterns of wind.
I think it's pretty cool that they think that the belief system about how there's a sense that dragons were tied to the origin of divinity, and that's why dragons are more worthy of worship.
Mm-hmm. It's super cool. And we got a level 5 hype train. Thanks
awesome.
Everyone for joining in.
Thank you, everybody.
So, the other interesting thing is they have a Wyrmblast bloodline, which is a divine version of the Draconic bloodline, with a slightly different blood magic and spells.
I mean, that makes sense. That's where their power comes from.
Yep. And that is the power in, like, Faith of the Dragons. And, you know, there are also other dragons who kind of use divine magic to begin with as their magic, like some of the metallic dragons do.
So what's going on with this guy here and that awesome magical thing that he's doing?
Well, I'm not entirely sure.
Is he dyeing his beard?
I think that he's using magic as part of dyeing his beard, is what I think. But it's pretty cool, and this section here about culture talks about dyeing their hair to reflect affinity not just with Sky of Clouds, but also their outlook on the world in general. And some of the different clans have their own different traditions. For instance, the Mwangi clan, which are very artistic, have a dyeing games, which are not like some kind of murder game, but are in fact actually a game of
changing
dyeing
the color of
and
their,
changing
of
the
their
color
hair, yeah.
of your hair. And so it's no surprise, given how much emphasis they put on that they have like some of the most amazing different hair colorations. And look at the sort of pattern on her hair.
Oh wow!
Like
it looks like she's surrounded in flames.
In a flaming sunset or something.
Yeah.
Or sunrise.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, Taralu really don't like the worshippers of evil dragons, but they sometimes get along with evil dragons just because they're very diplomatic and very reverent of dragons, and sometimes, like red dragons, for example, are very arrogant. Mm-hmm. And are more likely to get along well with people who are very reverent of dragons.
People who are like, oh yes, dragons are the origin of divinity. Ah yes, of course, praise be more.
Yes, everyone knows that. So obviously with their relations with the other peoples of the Mwangi Expanse are very diverse because of the fact that they are traveling diplomats who go and talk to people from all sorts of places.
And they also tend to speak many languages, or at the very least know some phrases in a variety of languages to help them get by.
Yep, and they're major allies with the Matangi Orcs, as two separate clans sent reinforcements against the demon cult of Abraxas. And they've befriended, they made peace between Knowles and Kongrasu, and just generally they get along well with a lot of the different groups
They
in the
also
area.
have connections to kobolds, who they see as their sort of spiritual cousins in reverence to dragons.
Yep, and they send a lot of children to the Mogambia, and when they reach the rank of Conversant, which is one of the kind of more intermediate ranks where you've graduated through some of the basics, but you're not like at the very higher echelons of like the grad school and professorial equivalent, then they return back to their home clan to kind of become lore speakers there, or spread some of the learning that they had gained. And when it comes to settlements for Taralu dwarves. There's Tenon Shroud, which is a mausoleum with the remains of the ancient cloud dragon is there, and it's considered a holy site and therefore neutral ground. Because remember, they wander around to a lot of different places, so they don't have like a huge number of giant cities like
Yes.
Mecca dwarves. And there's Chambers of the 16 for all the 16 leaders.
The Hermitage, a place for pilgrims to rest.
Yep, that's all part of Tannin Shroud.
Yes.
Zaffary is like an actual settlement that has an academy there, and the Pathfinder Society is kind of coming in there, and it's kind of more of a like, you can see these sort of tents, and also like the buildings are clearly like kind of built on stilts.
Mm-hmm.
So, which takes it several feet above the jungle floor. It can help with the heavy rainfall, which otherwise could cause serious flooding in the buildings. So it's kind of ready to deal with all sorts of different weather.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a sample character, Amakal Inre of Clan Zaffary, which is, when we're looking at the Zaffary settlement, Amakal is an archaeologist from that settlement who does not like the Dahak cultist raids.
And she is the Zaffary spiritual leader.
That's right. So, a very important person with also really cool dyed hair and dragon.
Naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and flip that over so you all can see her too.
Yep. So let's move on to Songo halflings.
Yes.
So Songo halflings have basically lived in the Laughing Jungle, and like for a long time they were only in the Laughing Jungle, but they recently sort of started heading out there and leaving the Laughing Jungle to go to a lot of different areas. They're very stealthful, and they watch for different things that are coming along, which means that they often like know a lot about you by the time that they're willing to actually come out and talk to you, because they've been watching everything that you've been doing and seeing like, oh, is this person like respecting this area, or maybe not. And if they don't think that you're someone that they want to reveal themselves to, then they just won't.
And historically, Songo halflings were came from Osirian,
Mm-hmm.
and they generally traveled around, and they fought against tyrannical empires for quite a while. And then they ultimately decided that they didn't want to deal with all of that anymore.
They were like in the edge of Nex, and then that was a problem, and then they were like, let's go to the Mwangi Expanse. And that's where they made it to the Screaming Jungle.
So
where
like,
they kind of
let's find a place where we can just not for a while, and we can have a peaceful existence.
Yep. And that's why they've been very secretive and just kind of hiding out there in the jungle. But they basically have been coming out more recently to other areas.
But many some have also been engaging secretly in helping with the rebellion against the colony of Sargava and things like that.
They're always watching. They have great intel, but they were just very much like the eyes in the trees who are always where the
they'll
trees
see
always
you
know
and they'll know
on.
what's going on, but you might not realize they're there.
Yep. And there's a great picture of a Songo halfling here. And some Songo use scarification to commemorate important life events.
Mm-hmm.
But others use makeup and facial paint instead. They love stick fighting matches. Look at the hair on the next Songo. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that is cool.
with the flowers. And they usually wear multiple layers of clothes where each layer has a different story.
A different story as well as a different function, which makes it very easy for them to be comfortable in a jungle, protected from insects and water and heat and all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Screaming Jungle, as we said in one of the other ones, is not
not
called that
safe.
because it's a super safe place to be. But
So
Songo halflings are just like, yeah, whatever.
If you're traveling in the if you're traveling in the Laughing Jungle, you probably want to talk to a Songo person about fabric if you can at all.
Oh right, yeah, that's right. They're in the Laughing Jungle. It's much nicer.
The
than
Laughing
the
Jungle is much
Jungle.
nicer than the Screaming Jungle. Yes.
It wouldn't be nice if they found a nice place for themselves to stay. It was the Screaming
it's
Jungle.
The Laughing Jungle.
It's easy to get them confused because they're both doing some kind of loud emotional activity.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
So, like, Songo have been moving around in the Laughing Jungle, and they do have some permanent encampments.
But they generally prefer to migrate with the seasons so that they can always be in places that have the best resources and travel around to locations that'll have rare plants in different times and seasons.
And that means that they travel on caravans. And they're led by a council of elder druid matriarchs known as the Ancien Ban. And basically, those druids perform all sorts of ceremonies, and sometimes they gather together with their caravans. So 3 times a year, they convene in Lac Se for a canafet, a meeting of elders and experts to discuss and confer on issues. So it's kind of like a moot where just all of the different caravans of Songo try to come together. And
there's a giant feast. There's all sorts of
tournaments.
There's all sorts of announcements.
And they like preserving fruits and vegetables into basically the form of a magical potion. So, you could have like a cherry orange that is a healing potion. And it has all of the activation abilities of the potion, but is in the form of a fruit.
Yes. And here there's some more talking about stick fighting.
Yeah, there's a fighting stick.
You can see the fighting sticks on this Songo man here, talking about it being it's set to music, and it's also and it also has like all the different rules about it. It's a test of strength, skill, and endurance.
That's right. And Songo halflings don't really place a huge amount of faith in gods because they're like, well, the gods can be killed. So they believe in themselves and their ancestors because that's just something that has a lot of continuity, whereas gods can just change their mind at any point in time.
Mm-hmm. And elders are generally expected to spend a few hours each day passing along their knowledge to the future generations as well.
That's right. And so when it comes to Songo halflings, their relations with some of the other people are, it's not quite as expensive as Taralu dwarves, who were the traveling diplomats who talked to everybody because they had kind of been in the Laughing Jungle, but they also definitely, they're kind of reluctant to go out there and put themselves really out there,
or to share their secrets and their knowledge.
But Vidrian, they like.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are willing to repay an old debt to the people of Vidrian. And they also kind of didn't like imperialist stuff that was going on and colonialism, so some people say it's because the Songo halfling community doesn't want, like, another chillaxing expansion to happen. They'd rather see Vidrian kind of just stay there.
And
as a buffer,
the people of Vidrian are still, like, trying to figure out, like, okay, we're trading now, but what does that mean? I don't understand. They're still so enigmatic, and they won't explain.
They're so enigmatic. Yep. And so when it comes to their permanent encampments, they do have some that are on La Caisse because that's where they do the 3 times a year kind of fete. And they also have something called Bon Xiaxion, which was built at the encouragement of their druidic leaders.
And it is a trading post, which is where a lot of that trade with Vidric merchants happens.
That's right. And it talks about like how to build a Sango halfling. That they're usually wildwood halflings, but there's some other heritages that you could take as well, and there's certain feats that they're very likely to go for when it comes to halfling ancestry feats. And then there is an example character, Nana Zela, who is one of the 5 Ancien Ban, and the one who lives in La Caisse just kind of all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you got all you need if the PCs come to La Caisse, which is probably like the most likely situation where you're going to know that there's going to be Sango halflings around. You have an authority figure NPC with lots of good information here to find out and roleplay.
Mm-hmm. I like that sentence there. Many of the details of her past are obscured by folklore. Depending on who you ask, she's been a caravan leader, a stick fighting champion, an adventurer, a pirate, and a healing druid.
Yep.
We'll be picking up here today with our biased reaction to Batanji orcs.
Okay, so there's a really cool picture here where there's a Vrock that's fighting against Batanji orcs, or maybe the Batanji orcs are fighting against the Vrock.
I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
So, Batanji orcs are, just like what we've been going through before, there were a lot of different ethnic groups of different ancestries in Mwangi Expanse, and Batanji orcs are an orc ethnic group from Mwangi Expanse, but they're pretty different from orcs in Hold of Balksen.
Yes, they have a strong reputation for being, for battling against demons and other fiendish forces, and doing so capably.
Yep. They're resistant to possession, they fight against demons, and they just generally want to beat up demons. And therefore, you know, people see them as pretty heroic because demons are bad, and beating up demons with ferocity and kind of duty to just attack the demons is something that people think is pretty great.
So most people, when they see an orc around in the Mwangi Expanse, are going to be like, hey, cool, there's an orc here. I feel a little bit safer.
And unless you're Bekiar, yes. Because the Bekiar have enough of them who worship demons that they're worried that, like, the Batanji orc will be like, you know, if we wipe out the Bekiar groups that are over here, then there won't be more Bekiar demon worshippers. Which, like, I can see why the ethnicity that has the most demon worshippers is worried about the one who fights against demons.
That's known for their skill at fighting against demons.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. It's not and like, Batanji do sometimes kill Bekiar demon cultists, and so it's like, Bekiar people probably know, like, somebody who has been killed by a Batanji orc. And so it makes sense that they're worried about
when they were going off and doing
when they were going off and doing demons.
Yes.
So basically that's the deal with Batanji. They're major demon hunters. They even have a demon blood frenzy where if they have fiendish blood that is like kind of on their tusks, then they kind of taste it and become quickened to make a tusk strike, stride, or step once per minute, so they could just kind of get use a reaction to get an extra action on their next turn. And basically, the idea is Batanji sort of went to the Mwangi Expanse during, you know, the Dwarven quest for Sky, when the dwarves pushed the orcs out pretty much everywhere. But
they were
in their
relatively
case,
insular in their ways until the servants of Angazan caused them increasing problems, started kidnapping their people and corrupting them.
It's not good.
Transforming them into Charuka.
Yep.
And the Matangi people just were not going to stand for that.
Yeah, they did not like that idea. And so they basically drove off Angazan's champion, Gorilla King, and just attacked him. And unfortunately, uh, like a lot of them got killed during that attack. But you know they are now major enemies of Angazan ever since then.
And other similar demonic beings.
Yep, but like especially Angazan.
But especially Angazan, yes.
He's their least favorite. And they like to dance. They've got all sorts of practical fashion because you never know when you're going to fight against demons. So you've got some cold iron, maybe silver in case there's a devil, just kind of mixed into your leathers. And they like to fight with a combination of weapons and magic, kind of more so than orcs do in Belkzen. And especially, you know, weapons and magic that are going to be good against demons. They do hate demons, as we've said.
They tend to prefer short hair on all genders because hair is something that a demon could grab during combat.
Mm-hmm. And they wind up getting scars or exposures to demonic energy from killing so many demons at a certain point, and that gives kind of that's a mark of approval from other Matangi when they're like, oh wow, yeah, there's like a weird demon magic thing that happened over half your face. That is awesome. You must be the greatest. How many demons have you killed to get that? And even if they haven't killed demons, the Matangi just kind of like that anyway, because it's like someone who's an awesome demon hunter. So, as you might expect, the rulers of sort of Matangi culture as a whole are a small council, which are made up of the best demon hunters and also some diplomats. And when a leader dies, they kind of vote to see who is the best demon hunter and or diplomat at the time, and just add them into that council. The problem is they could get addicted to demon blood, especially if you use that feat, Demon Blood Frenzy. You might get addicted to demon blood. Don't do it. And so they sometimes will like just carry around demon blood that they kind of turn into a chew or something like that, so that they can deal with their addiction without like actually a problem where they have to go to demons and be like, please give me some blood. So just like we talked about half elves when we were dealing with elves, half orcs, or the Witangi for Matangi, are also known as Rainkin by outsiders, and are held in very high regard and given like additional educational opportunities, and have very high status in Matangi villages. So that's one thing that's similar to Belkzen, like the one commonality, even though everything else is pretty different. I guess also they like fighting, and they like marks of scars and tenacity. That's similar to Belkzen too. So really there are a fair number of similarities, other than that they fight demons.
But that doesn't always mean that life as a Witangi is the best, because people are like, oh yes, you know, we have this really prestigious Witangi in our family, and you might have like people trying to like profit off of them, or pouring huge numbers of expectations into them, being like, oh yes, you're gonna be the best, you're gonna be the one who does these things.
Like, you might get too high of expectations, you might get people profiteering on you, like if you're a child celebrity, and like what are even your own parents or other people doing, and it can cause just some significant social issues for you, but in the direction of they think you're great rather than that they think you're terrible. So alcohol is extremely important gift for Matangi, and you want to give Ogogoro in many cases, because it's very popular and made from palm sap. So that's what, if you encounter Matangi orc, and you don't know what to do when you need to give a significant gift, give some Ogogoro, and then you'll probably be okay, but maybe not. So here's an interesting fact about them. Kazutal, or Mother Jaguar, who is almost, like, vastly mostly worshipped in Arcadia, is actually a significant patroness of Matangi orcs. And so the worship had spread over and then just really caught on, and so they call her Majagua sometimes, which I guess is, like, short for Mother Jaguar.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it even says in the book it's extremely notable in the light of the fact that her influence is mainly contained in Arcadia.
You can see some art of her there.
Yeah, it's a Mwangi depiction.
Yeah, as it says in that entry, Matangi orcs aren't necessarily known for, like, creating large, complicated, decorative art that could be destroyed in a demon attack, and they prefer more practical praise, like offering her praise while they're hunting.
Mm-hmm.
Or when they're about to do something important, like have a council meeting.
Yep. And another similarity to Balks and Orcs, Matangi culture are very negative on liars. They're blunt and to the point, and they're just going to tell you straight whatever they think, dive headfirst into an argument or a battle, and
that's really sweet there, though, like when it talks about, like, when Matangi orc likes another, they generally would initiate courtship by finding out what their object of their affection loves, and then dropping a huge amount of that thing at their door.
A crate of cold iron ingots so that they can make weapons to kill demons, for example. That's a very romantic gift, right?
I heard you like flowers. Here's an entire flower field.
Yup. So, when it comes to relationships with other groups, we already mentioned that when we talked about Ekujai elves, that given that Ekujai elves really like to, fight. They fight the hawk. They like to fight down and hunt down evil. Matangi orcs and Ekujai elves really, really get along.
For Alijai elves, Matangi orcs respect them, but also are somewhat unnerved by the Alijai concept of use any and all knowledge and resources available. They think that could lead to the Alijai crossing some lines that should not be crossed.
Involving demons. Obviously, they're hostile towards Bekiars because slavery and demons. And when it comes to Yamasans, who, as we mentioned before in this sort of other human ethnicities group, had to deal with that whole I have a Bendigo destroying everything. Matangi orcs get along very, very well with them because after the destruction of their home, Matangi orcs welcome them into their, like, protected against demons areas,
and
which were kind of nearby.
Mentions Matangi orcs versus orcs from other continents, where they tend to just be like, very curious about each other, because, like, what is your deal?
Yep. And honestly, it doesn't say this in here, but I suspect that that if a bunch of Yamasans, like, just joined Matangi orcs at that point after the Eva Bendigo, that probably means if you're playing a Witangi that there's a decent chance that one of your parents is a Yamasa. Oh, it said it in the Witangi? Well, we went through too quickly. Yes, there it did. It said they were born from Yamasans because of... So it precursored that.
Yeah, I mentioned that in a few places.
Yeah, it definitely did. Okay, well, I got it from guessing instead of remembering that it was literally in there.
There you go. The book is thorough. What can I say?
So, when it comes to Matangi's settlements, they basically build giant fortresses because they hate demons.
Yes.
And they basically also they they have this thing called the 9 walls around their land that are each different layers that eventually get you into the deepest parts. So their entire sort of nationish area is a fortress.
So you can think of it as a meta fortress that is made of smaller
So
fortresses.
there's like a wall around everything to make a fortress, and then that fortress, inside of it is a fortress.
Yes.
And inside of that fortress is another fortress. So it's like kind of like Attack on Titan or something, where they have like the outer wall, and then the inner wall, and then another wall that's in the wall. And so the notable information they put is about the walls here. So like Ukuja is the first wall. It's a city fortress full of young seasoned orcs and a few aging veterans to do the tactics for them. And they're the first ones who have to deal with demons who are coming around the area, and Bekiar do not go within miles of that wall.
Yes.
And then Kutanju is the second wall, and it's basically right next to the first wall because demons are tricky and they'll probably get through your first wall, and they have dimension door. So
and it works as a prison as well, where they can imprison lesser demons and then carefully release them for young Mitanji to trade. They're always weak enough. There's always weak enough that, like, if the demon actually started causing a problem, the experienced orc supervising the thing could dispatch the demon immediately.
It's tricky because of their dimension door, but they probably pick demons that are weak enough that they don't have 5th level dimension door, or use dimensional anchors and locks to make sure that they don't get out.
I mean, as it says here, most of the information, anti-demon magic and strategies and tactics regarding demons
that's probably what they do.
from tests provided in this settlement.
And so eventually you get to the 9th wall, Madakali, and there's a giant city in there. And it's the biggest wall. It's said to be one of the safest places in the entire Mwangi Expanse because they had to get through 9 walls of orcs and defenses to get into here. And outsiders usually aren't allowed in. That's part of the security, because who knows if they're possessed by a demon or what. Or like secretly a demon worshiper. There are a lot of things that could happen involving demons. And so
you have like a combination of politicians, some of whom actually aren't great at battle, and seasoned tired war veterans.
Yep, who were like, they were the greatest, but now they're just kind of past the point where they can be on the first wall leading the youngsters with tactics.
One thing that's really interesting here is you might think that like the veterans would be like, oh, look at these cushy spoiled brats, but actually they're like, no, this is good. I'm glad that there are people who get to, not everyone has to fight against the demons.
Mm-hmm. And of course the ones who fought there for a long time have earned their stripes.
Yes. Like, not everyone has to fight demons, and there's some people who can focus on other ways to improve the resources, the prestige, and the power of our society.
Yep. And then the Demon Bane Manor is in Madakali and is sort of the big social hub where people are going to gather because it's called Demon Bane, so it's got to be good. And council members can come there, and you can do orc courtship there. Of course, where you just go in there and are asked about background statuses and finance and culture and interests, and just flat out they try to match you up and court you with other orcs, or with orcs if you are not an orc.
It can be awkward for outsiders who are not expecting them to be like extremely forthright, because as it says before, they're like just gonna say like, yes, I am interested in courting you. What is your favorite thing? Allow me to give you copious amounts of that favorite
thing. Here's 500 animal skins. So Witanli, as you can guess by the fact that it starts with Witan, like Witanji, is a settlement that is all entirely populated by Witanji, half-orcs. And basically, some Witanji want to live around other Witanji, but the Mitanji are like, well, you still have to be in the 9 walls or you're not going to be safe. So the compromise is that Witanli was sort of came out of a university campus type situation that is like past the 6th wall and is known for scholarly research. There's also Rainkin Academy, which is an incredibly giant campus that stretches for over a mile, which is similarly a giant research for magic that are done by Witanji as well. And Yamonji, which is outside of the Manakali, so therefore that would make it in the 8th layer of the 9 layers, is a giant farm. That's where they get a lot of their food.
And then here we have a Morclaw Hornbreaker,
who is an incredibly powerful demon hunting sorcerer, who was born in the aristocratic lifestyle where he didn't, in the very center, and didn't have to do any of the fighting, but wanted to do it anyway. And so, Morclaw killed lots of demons.
And he had powers that awakened within him, strange and unsettling powers that he used to fight demons to great effect.
He had 67 children.
Yes.
So far. All right, so that is Matangi Orcs. All right, so let's say bye to YouTube.
Yes.
Bye, YouTube. See you next
Bye.
time.